Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere hot so hot your flip-flops would melt to your feet before you even noticed. Picture it, a rolling sea of pale orange dunes stretching past the curve of the earth. The wind is dry, relentless, brushing sand into your ears, your mouth, the folds of your clothes, and yes, even into places you didn't think sand could get. There's no shade, no water, just shimmering heat and endless silence, broken only by the crunch of your slow footsteps. But here's the twist: you're not walking on nothing. Underneath your tired feet is a world, buried, breathing past, miles below the dry crust of the Sahara Desert. Something ancient stirs, a secret not made of bones or broken pots, but water. Cold, hidden, forgotten water. Deep below, an invisible ocean sits quietly, like an old god no longer worshipped. You probably won't survive this trek without hydration, shade, or GPS. But hey, we're here to learn, not to tan. So, you'll be just fine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you tuning in from tonight? And what time is it by you? I'm always curious which corners of the world we drift through together now. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. You press deeper into the Sahara, guided by nothing but the sound of your breath and the story forming around you. Below the dunes lies something few people ever think about. The ancient Nubian sandstone aquifer system, a sprawling, interconnected series of underground reservoirs so vast it stretches across Libya, Sudan, Egypt, and Chad. It's not just old, it's prehistoric. The water was locked down there thousands, even millions of years ago during wetter, lusher times. The irony is delicious. The driest region on Earth sits atop one of the largest freshwater reserves known to humanity. Imagine it like this. Underneath all this sand is a layered sponge made of rock and time. When ancient rains fell, they didn't just run off into the sea, they seeped into the earth, filling up crevices and porous rock, settling, cooling, and hiding. Today, those aquifers lie buried beneath kilometers of parched land. Some of this water hasn't seen sunlight since woolly mammoths were still stomping around Europe, and yet we tap it. Wells plunge through stone, drawing up this fossil water for drinking, farming, the occasional ill-fated utopian dream. Like Libya's famous Great Man-Made River Project, which tried to use this aquifer to green the desert before cost. Conflict and time caught up. The water down there is no modern miracle. It's a relic. Once it's used up, that's it. You can't refill an aquifer like that in a few rainy seasons. It takes millennia. So every drop is a sip from history. The air up here is still, but your mind is whirling. You pause. Your foot slips on loose grit, and you stumble, catching yourself on what looks like a stone ledge poking up from the sand. But look closer. It's part of a dried-out wellhead, one of many abandoned attempts to pull water from deep underground. There's no telling how old it is. Perhaps decades, maybe centuries. The Sahara doesn't always erase the past. Sometimes it preserves it with eerie precision. This idea of ancient water doesn't just stir curiosity, changes maps. A few decades ago, satellites began mapping something strange under the sand. Ancient riverbeds, long vanished, now nothing more than shallow scars in the bedrock. The biggest was dubbed the Tamanrasset River, wider than the Mississippi, possibly once fed by rainfall in the highlands of West Africa. It hasn't flowed in thousands of years, but its ghost remains. You cross a low depression in the sand, and notice how the wind has worn away the dune just enough to expose a faint ripple in the rock, like the bottom of a dried stream. Could this be it? Could you be standing in the bed of a lost river that once watered elephants and rhinos? Historians still argue whether the Tamanrasset River ever reached the Atlantic Ocean, or whether it petered out inland, swallowed by marshes, or seasonal lakes. But what's certain is this: the Sahara wasn't always Sahara. Before it was a desert, it was something else entirely, a green, alive, teeming wilderness. We'll get to that in a bit. But first, let's talk about one more secret, hiding underneath mud volcanoes. Yes, that's right. They exist here too. These aren't the lava-spewing beasts you're picturing. Mud volcanoes are cold, and they burp up clay, water, and gases from deep below. Some researchers believe there are dozens scattered beneath the Sahara, sealed by the weight of time and sand. There are clue-strange, squelching proof that geological forces are still shaping the underworld beneath your dusty boots. And then there's the unsettling part. Some believe the pressure of tapping the aquifers drawing up too much fossil water to fast could someday destabilize the crust. Quiet tremble, a sudden shift, maybe even a collapse of sand where there once was solid ground. Nothing dramatic, just a slow rearranging of things humans thought they could control. You glance around. The desert, vast and empty, seems to be listening. Still with me. Traveled over invisible rivers, walked ancient sea floors, and brushed your hand along stone that once lay beneath a lake. And yet it's just the surface, because before this became desert, the land beneath was ocean. We're not talking about lakes or seasonal floods now. We're talking about a real ocean, deep and warm, that existed long before humans were even a dream. In evolution's eye. In fact, some of the oldest marine fossils on Earth have been found under Saharan rock layers, trilobites, ammonites, prehistoric sharks. Sometimes, when they drill for oil out here, they hit unexpected surprises, shells, or even coral structures embedded deep in the stone. Oil, after all, is made from compressed biological matter, dead plankton, and sea life. So it makes sense that where there's oil, there was once life. Life in an ocean, now a wasteland. And here's your weirdest fringe theory of the night. Some fringe researchers and a few very hopeful YouTubers claim that beneath parts of the Sahara lies an ancient sunken city, lost when sea levels changed. No real evidence supports it, just satellite shapes and dream-fed speculation. But still, as you stare out at a land so still, so flat, and so massive, you can't help but wonder, what if? And before you drift off into theories of sand-buried Atlantis, just know that real explorers, scientists, archaeologists, geologists are still uncovering surprises out here. They find fossil fish in places that haven't seen water in 10,000 years. They find ancient shorelines etched into stone way up on desert cliffs. They find salt rivers of it, hardened in the sun, a final gift from vanished lakes. You kneel, scoop a handful of Sahara sand and let it fall through your fingers. Every grain, once part of a mountain or a riverbed or a coral reef, particle has been somewhere else, done something else. Even the silence here is recycled. And so, your journey begins, not just across the world's largest desert, but down through time and deep into what still sleeps beneath the sands. You trudge onward, the sand shifting beneath your feet like powdered memory. The sun above is a quiet tyrant, searing your skin even as it falls slowly toward the horizon. But with every step, you're walking not through emptiness, but through time. Because this desert, this endless, desolate stretch, used to be green. No, not just patches of oasis. We're talking full-on savannas, forests, wetlands, a Sahara so lush and vibrant that you wouldn't have survived the mosquito swarms, let alone the hippo temps. It's hard to picture now, but picture it anyway. Close your eyes for a second and imagine broad, slow rivers winding through grassy plains, herds of elephants kicking up muddy spray, crocodiles sunning themselves on flat rocks, trees, actual trees casting shade over everything, birds in the canopy, frogs croaking at dusk, and humans too. Little groups of them gathered around cooking fires, talking, laughing, maybe swatting flies. The Sahara wasn't always dry. In fact, it's been green multiple times in the past few 100,000 years. These lush periods, known as African humid periods, arrived like unexpected invitations to a garden party. They didn't last forever, but while they did, desert bloomed. One of the most striking humid periods began around 10,000 years ago. Right after the last ice age, global temperatures rose, glaciers melted, and the Earth's tilt shifted just slightly, just enough to change seasonal monsoon patterns. As a result, rains that normally bypassed this area started soaking it. The Sahara turned into a vast playground of life. Evidence is everywhere. You see it carved into rock walls, painted in caves, and even buried beneath the sand. Lakes bigger than modern-day Great Lakes once sprawled across northern Africa. One in Chad, called Mega Lake Chad, may have been larger than all 5 Great Lakes combined. And yes, people lived beside it. Historians still argue whether these lakes were stable or seasonal, whether they surged suddenly or took centuries to rise, but what they agree on is this: they were real and they were enormous. Now you may be wondering, how do we know all this if it's just sand now? Good question. The answers come from radar scans, satellite imagery, sediment cores, and surprisingly pollen. That's right, any ancient grains of pollen preserved in lake beds and soil have helped scientists reconstruct entire landscapes. These microscopic particles are like plant DNA postcards from the past, each one saying, "Hey, I grew here." You come across a windswept plateau and pause. Yeah, there's a faint etching in the rock lines that seem too deliberate to be natural. It's a petroglyph carved thousands of years ago. And what's it showing? A giraffe? Not a skeletal one, not a mythic one, just a giraffe. Walking through tall grass giraffes in the Sahara. You'd laugh if it weren't so eerie. Thousands of these images exist, scrawled across what's now bare rock in places like Tassili, Najur in Algeria, or the Gilf Khyber in Egypt. They depict hunters, dancers, boats, cattle, even swimming people. One famous painting nicknamed "The Swimmers of the Sahara" shows human figures floating in water, out here, and they weren't hallucinating or being metaphorical. These were ordinary people painting their ordinary lives. Imagine someone making a cave TikTok of their daily life fishing, swimming, chasing antelope, and then thousands of years later, we're still staring at their uploads in faded ochre and charcoal. During this green Sahara period known scientifically as the Holocene wet phase, life flourished. Cultures spread, herders followed their flocks across plains, and early human settlements began to form. They made pottery, they farmed, they even traded one quirky little tidbit. Some of the earliest known milk residues on pottery have been found in this region, suggesting ancient Saharan people were drinking and maybe fermenting dairy products long before the European cowboys gave it a try. So, yeah, hair and cheese might have been a thing. Hope you're lactose tolerant, but the rains didn't last. Over time, Earth's tilt shifted again, the monsoons retreated southward, and the green paradise began to brown. Slowly at first, then rapidly. Rivers dried, lakes shrank, herds migrated, died. Human populations were squeezed into tighter, harsher spaces. You can still feel that slow heartbreak out here. In every fossilized lakeshore, in every abandoned settlement, there's this whisper of things slipping away, sand swallowing, memories. And then the question hangs in the heat. Why did they stay? Some moved south into the Sahel and deeper into sub-Saharan Africa, but some stayed as long as they could, clinging to springs, carving wells, watching their world wither. There's a theory that this green Tudorite transition may have pushed people toward the Nile, contributing to the rise of ancient Egypt. The fertile Nile Valley, after all, was a refuge, a place where water still ran, where crops could still grow. So maybe the roots of one of the world's greatest civilizations started right here, the drying sigh of a dying green Sahara. And while mainstream science follows the climate tilt monsoon explanation, there's a fringe theory for you. Some believe the Sahara's greening and drying was influenced by massive solar events, cycles of solar radiation affecting Earth's weather in mysterious ways. Not proven, not disprovable, just weird enough to linger in the back of your mind while the wind moans over your shoulders. You squat on a dune and scoop up another handful of sand. It's dry, lifeless, but in its fine grains are the ashes of ancient forests. Some sand particles are ground up tree bark, others are fish bones. The Sahara is made of ghosts, and somewhere out there, buried under all this heat and hush, are ancient hearths, stone circles, mud brick walls. Traces of people who once laughed and drank and sang under leafy canopies. The Sahara has always been a desert of extremes. One moment, it's a sea of water, the next, a sea of dust, and you're caught in between those moments, tiptoeing across time, piecing together the puzzle of a landscape that seems to vanish even as you study it. You pass another wind-carved ridge. On the other side, sheltered in a crack between stones, there's a stubborn little weed, alive, green, reaching toward a sky that gives it nothing. And yet here it grows, a single living thing, clinging to a place that once cradled millions. And if you press your ear to the ground, you won't hear anything. But if you imagine hard enough, you can almost feel it. The pulsing echo of rivers that no longer run, forgotten rhythm of frogs at dusk, the rustle of reeds in warm wind. You keep walking. Behind you, your footprints vanish almost instantly. Ahead, the desert stretches on, waiting to show you what else it is hidden. You walk now through a windless corridor of rust-red cliffs and parched stone plateaus. The sand crunches underfoot, but something about the landscape feels different, quieter, as if the desert is holding its breath. You round a corner, and suddenly you freeze. There it is, a low, dark entrance carved into rock, barely visible unless the sun hits it just right. You duck beneath the stone overhang and step inside, brushing past grit-covered walls and into shadow. The temperature drops like someone flipped a switch. And slowly the world around you changes, because what you've found isn't just shelter, it's memory, painted in color, etched in devotion. This is one of the Sahara's ancient rock art galleries, a cave of forgotten dreams. The flickering light from outside spills just enough illumination for you to make out the walls. Ochre reds, dusty yellows, dark browns, and ghostly whites. Figures begin to emerge. Herds of cattle, people dancing, hunters with bows. And there's someone swimming, their arms outstretched mid-stroke, their legs floating behind them, like swimming right here, where now only sand falls. These aren't just crude doodles, they are surprisingly fluid, expressive, even elegant. You can almost hear the laughter, the splashing, the chatter around campfires. These murals, some over 8,000 years old, aren't relics. They're voices, and they've waited millennia for someone to listen. Welcome to Tassili Najar, one of the largest and most mysterious concentrations of prehistoric cave art on Earth. Nestled in southeastern Algeria, this vast plateau holds over 15,000 images scattered across caves, canyons, and overhangs. The name roughly means plateau of the rivers, which is either ironic or heartbreakingly accurate depending on your mood. Archaeologists have tried to categorize these artworks into time periods. They talk of the round head period with its eerie, oversized humanoid figures, the pastoral period full of cattle and domestic scenes, the horse period when equine companions began appearing, and the final camel period, signaling the Sahara's true shift into desert. Each wave of imagery tells a different story. The earlier ones, people are nude or minimally clothed, interacting with wild animals, giraffes, elephants, even lions. Later, they're shown with cattle, suggesting a move toward herding and a more settled life. And throughout it all, there's motion. These aren't static symbols. People are shown walking, hugging, chasing, or dancing in spirals. You can almost imagine the original artist humming a tune while painting it. Some of the figures have arms raised toward the sky. Are they praying, celebrating rain, greeting the dawn? Historians still argue whether these rock painters were part of the same culture evolving over time, or whether waves of migration brought new artistic styles. No one can say for certain. The timeline blurs beneath the brushstrokes. You run your fingers gently over the stone, careful not to smudge anything. The pigments made from minerals, fat, and water have outlasted empires, storms, and silence. There's something humbling about that, and then, as your eyes adjust further, you see it, tucked into a shadowed recess of the wall. Half covered by flaking dust is a figure unlike the others. It's taller, rounded, the head is bulbous, with wide, unblinking eyes. The arms hang too long, almost like tendrils. The body seems to float above the ground. Scholars call these round heads. Some say they're shamans in ceremonial trance. Others think they're spiritual visions, maybe gods, maybe ancestors, maybe something else. And then, of course, there are the fringe theorists who confidently proclaim aliens. You knew it was coming. To be fair, the round heads do have an unearthly look. They stand apart from the realistic cattle and human figures, and they're often placed in what seem to be ritualistic positions facing certain directions, encircled by smaller humans, even hovering over others like celestial beings. It's the kind of image that makes your skin prickle. But let's not rush to ancient astronaut conclusions. Instead, consider this. Maybe these were early experiments in expressing the unseen. Dreams, fears, emotions. What would a trance look like, painted on rock? What do you show the invisible moment when someone crosses into the spirit world? This cave becomes a cathedral. You sit down, cross-legged, and listen not with ears, but with your whole body. A light wind whistles through the entrance. Dust particles dance like spirits. Outside, the desert rages. But in here, the past is preserved in pigment. Here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some of these caves were deliberately buried in sand by later people, perhaps to protect the art, or hide it from enemies, or simply because they'd become sacred, too sacred to be seen. It's like someone threw a dusty blanket over history and whispered, "Let's keep this one quiet." All rock art is confined to caves. Some is out in the open, scraped onto cliff faces and boulders, vulnerable to wind and time. In Libya, at places like Tadrat Akakis, you'll find similar images: families, livestock, even musical instruments. Some depict boats in the desert, which makes sense, given that people used to paddle across lakes now vanished. Historians still debate whether these artworks were created by mobile herders returning to the same sacred sites seasonally, or whether permanent settlements once thrived. Nearby, there's little physical evidence of large villages' stone tools here. Broken pottery there, but the art is abundant. It's almost as if storytelling was their architecture, and it worked. You're sitting here now in 2025, staring at a hunting scene that someone painted in 5000 BCE, and you understand it. No translator needed, just eyes, and maybe a little wonder. You notice something strange, too. The hunters in many of these scenes are drawn smaller than the animals, not out of proportion but in deliberate reverence. A lion looms large, an elephant towers. The people stay humble. It's a worldview, one we've mostly lost. Outside the cave, the sun is dipping low. The desert is turning gold, then red, then indigo. You step out into a silence so thick it wraps around you like a blanket. You take one last look at the cave mouth. From this angle, it doesn't look like much, but just another crack in another rock, but inside a theater, a time capsule. A diary of people who laughed and sang and painted their lives into stone, because they knew someday maybe you'd come looking, and now you have. You continue walking, a little quieter now. The wind is picked up again, pushing you gently onward. The dunes ripple like waves. The air cools, but the memory of those cave walls stays warm. You realize you've only scratched the surface of what lies beneath. The night deepens as you make your way across a wind-swept plain, your path lit only by the moon and the soft silver sheen it casts over the sand. The temperature has dropped sharply enough that you can see your breath for the first time, but you keep walking, drawn by something strange. Something still stirring under this desert hush. Eventually, you reach a stony rise, a lonely hill of cracked shale and fossil-rich gravel. Doesn't look like much at first, just another wrinkle in the Sahara's endless face. But at the top, under a flat, moonlit slab, stumble on something completely unexpected. Bones, not scattered, not animal. These are human skeletons laid out in positions that are well peaceful, like they were placed here with care. Hand resting gently near a skull. A child nestled in the crook of a woman's arm. Welcome to Gabera, the Sahara's oldest known graveyard. You kneel beside the remains, a little awed, a little unsettled. These people died over 9,000 years ago, and their bones still lie where they were laid, preserved in what used to be the edge of a lake. You're not the first to find them. 2000s. What they found stunned everyone, because Gobero isn't just a burial site, it's a time capsule of two completely different cultures, living and dying in the Sahara during two separate green periods, with a long stretch of brutal drought in between. The first group, known as the Kifians, were tall, strong, and heavily built. Some stood well over 6 feet tall. They were likely hunter-fishers, surviving on lake life and game. Their graves are simple but careful. Bodies face the same direction. Some are buried with artifacts, arrowheads, beads, food offerings. The second group came thousands of years later, after the Sahara briefly regrinified. These were the Tenerians, shorter, more delicate. Their skulls suggest a different ancestry. Their graves even more elaborate. Some bodies are surrounded by flowers, fossilized pollen still clinging to the soil, as if someone sprinkled petals over them moments ago. It's quiet up here, but you can almost hear the rustle of fabric, the murmur of songs, the crunch of footsteps as families mourn their dead. You turn to one particular grave, a woman and 2 children arranged so that they're touching. One child's tiny hand rests against her cheek. It's intimate. Striking thousands of years have passed, and yet that single gesture survives a silent echo of tenderness. Historians still argue whether these two cultures intermingled or whether they came in waves, separated by centuries of desolation. What we do know is that both groups lived in a Sahara very different from the one you see now. Sahara full of lakes and food and life, but even that abundance had limits. Drought returned, the lakes dried, the land cracked. Now the people vanished, and their bones remained behind, undisturbed for millennia until unearthed by accident. When a research team scouting for dinosaur fossils found a human skull instead, talk about a detour. You examine a necklace lying near one of the skeleton's tiny, pierced shells likely brought from faraway coasts. Even back then, humans traded, traveled, and told stories. The Sahara wasn't a barrier. It was a home, a place people lived and died and loved in. Here's your fringe tidbit for the night. Some researchers believe Gobero and sites like it may not be isolated anomalies, but part of a wider prehistoric civilization lost to time, which once crisscrossed a lush Sahara. No writing, no cities, but networks of people connected by rivers, rituals, and memories. A kind of green Sahara Atlantis, less high-tech, more high-touch. Of course, skeptics roll their eyes. But as more sites like Gobero are uncovered, some with pottery, some with burial mounds, some with animal enclosures, the idea starts to gain traction. Maybe they weren't just roaming tribes. Maybe they were communities, even cultures. You stand up, brushing sand from your knees. The wind carries a dry, low hum now, like the ghost of a lullaby drifting across the dunes, the kind you'd sing. Two children under a canopy of reeds further downhill. You notice fragments of ancient tools, grinding stones, likely used for preparing wild grains. This means people here weren't just hunting, they were also gathering, maybe even cultivating early agriculture. Another spark of civilization. But then, of course, the green Sahara blinked out again. The rain stopped and the people left, or perished, or both. The lake receded, the mud hardened, sands arrived. And everything got quiet until you showed up. You take a deep breath. The air is thin and cold. Your footsteps echo across the barren hilltop, and the bones remain behind you, half buried, still resting, a testament to a time when this place rang. With laughter and fish splashed in shallow waters, not a graveyard but a village, a home, and then, just as you're ready to descend the hill, your eyes catch a shimmer, something half buried in the sand. You kneel and dig gently, uncovering a single shard of pottery. It's painted a geometric pattern, simple but precise, the kind of design that takes practice, maybe even pride. You hold it in your palm and think, someone made this, someone with hands like yours, eyes like yours, hopes and irritations and cravings like yours. They made it to hold something, a meal, a gift, a prayer. Then they died. The desert took it all, but not quite everything. You continue walking, and with every step, the landscape flattens. You've left the lake basin behind now and are entering a wide open stretch. The stars above are dizzying, so many, so bright that for a moment you forget the ground even exists. Just sky and wind and time. A faint ridge rises ahead. Maybe another dried lake bed, maybe an old riverbank, maybe the edge of a lost world. You'll find out soon enough. The wind starts to shift. Less whisper now, more murmur, like something stirring under the sand. You press onward toward a ridge barely visible in the starlight, your feet crunching on loose gravel and sun-baked sediment. As the horizon begins to glow faintly with pre-dawn light, the landscape changes again. Gone are the rolling dunes and bone-strewn plateaus. Before you lies a flat, endless plain of hardened earth-dull gray and salt-white in patches, marked by strange geometric ripples. The sun creeps higher, and you see it more clearly, not natural shapes, but remnants, lines, angles, foundations. You've stepped into the ruins of a city, or at least what once may have been one. There are no walls standing, no temples to admire. Just outlines, foundations of long-lost settlements buried under centuries of silence, their bones exposed only by the wind's occasional generosity. This is what remains of ancient trade cities, once vital oases of gold, salt, and survival. One name flickers in your mind like a mirage, Tadmeka, now known as Isuk in northern Mali. This forgotten city was once a powerhouse of Trans-Saharan trade back when camels were the 18-wheelers of the desert and caravans carried slabs of salt like sacred cargo. Mecca flourished. Its markets buzzed with traders from Ghana, Berbers from the north, and even whispers from across the Mediterranean. Historians still argue whether Mecca was older than the Ghana Empire or simply a smart parasite riding the coattails of the gold boom. Either way, it had a reputation as a city of wealth, learning, and perhaps more than a little mystery. A medieval Arab geographer once described it as a town built from gold dust, though he was probably being poetic. Probably you step carefully over what looks like a collapsed dwelling, its mud brick outlines still visible in the dust. Your foot brushes something hard. You crouch and pull out a shard of glazed pottery, deep blue and white, unmistakably imported. Imagine that, a tea bowl or oil lamp from medieval Spain or Persia, lost in the middle of the Sahara. This was no isolated village. This was a hub, a crossroads, where north met west met, deeper Africa, and all of it came wrapped in gold and salt. You can't talk about Saharan cities without salt. Back then, salt was currency, literally, pressed food, maintained health, and was so valued that entire caravans risked death just to fetch it. One of the great centers of this salty economy was Tagaza, a bleak mining settlement further north, where workers hacked at salt slabs in shimmering heat, their hands blistered and lips cracked. Here's your quirky fact of the night. Some ancient Saharan merchants were paid in salt, and then used gold to buy things like grain. Gold was for trade, salt was for survival. Try explaining that to your modern wallet. Of course, Tagaza wasn't much to look at, even then. But the whole town was built from salt blocks, walls, roofs, even furniture. Imagine living in a house that slowly dissolves every time it rains. Then again in Tagaza, it rarely did, and it wasn't the only one. Hundreds of trade stops dotted the desert. From Walata in Mauritania to Gao and Timbuktu in Mali, some long lost, others slowly rediscovered. Beneath the creeping sand, you probably know Timbuktu as the punchline to jokes about remote places. But once, it was the beating heart of Saharan commerce and scholarship. The city of Gao predates even that, founded around the 7th century. It grew into a thriving hub of trade, politics, and Islamic learning. Clay tablets and ancient letters. Unearthed here describe bustling markets, legal disputes, and gossip over imports. And yet they're fading, swallowed by the shifting dunes, eaten by salt, worn down by time. You sit beside a ridge that was likely once a road. Camels would have plotted here in long lines, their bells tinkling, their feet crunching on sand and stone. They carried ivory, kola nuts, ostrich feathers, and cloth, and sometimes people too. Slavery, sadly, was part of the picture. A reminder that wealth and horror often walked hand in hand. Somewhere along this very road, a traveler in the 14th century might have crossed paths with one of the wealthiest men in history, Mansa Musa. Yes, that Mansa Musa, the emperor of Mali, whose 1324 pilgrimage to Mecca was so extravagant, it crashed the economies of multiple cities en route. He gave away so much gold that markets destabilized. He didn't just pass through the desert. He redefined it. Imagine being one of the local merchants when his caravan rolls in thousands of camels, each loaded with gold, attendants, scholars, horses, dancers, maybe even griots, singing the emperor's praises. You offer him a bowl of dates and a place to sit. He hands you a gold nugget the size of a potato. Wild times, but even empires fall. Trade routes shift. The gold dries up. Loses its luster. The desert forgets. Here's the fringe theory for this chapter. Some explorers infringe. Historians believe there's a still lost city beneath the sands, older than Tadmeka or Timbuktu, possibly tied to a pre-Islamic empire. They call it Zerzuru, the oasis of little birds, described in medieval texts as a white city guarded by black giants. It's never been found, but the legend persists. Could it have existed, or is it just wishful thinking, an ancient mirage given form by imagination and thirst? Either way, you keep moving. You pass a cluster of weather-smoothed stones, aligned suspiciously neatly. Someone slept here once, someone cooked here, Someone bartered for cloth or argued over camel prices. This was life, not just history. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes heat, like you tie a scarf across your face, letting only your eyes peer. Out like the Tuareg, the desert's legendary blue men, whose indigo-dyed veils stain their skin and mark their resilience. They've traveled these routes for centuries and still do. The Tuareg didn't build empires of stone. They built empires of movement, fluid, mobile, reliant on memory and landscape instead of buildings. Their knowledge of oases, stars, and sand made them indispensable to the trade networks that once thrived here. And they're still around riding motorcycles now as often as camels, but their stories remain. Some passed down in songs, others in whispered warnings of storms cursed. Wells and places best left undisturbed. You pause beside a patch of cracked earth. Something glints faintly. A coin, a bead, a broken blade. You're not sure, and it doesn't matter. 'Cause every grain here is history. Every breath is borrowed from a world that used to sing. You rise and keep walking. Somewhere ahead is the next ghost, another whisper from beneath the sands. The wind starts to shift. Less whisper now, more murmur, like something stirring under the sand. You press onward toward a ridge barely visible in the starlight, your feet crunching on loose gravel and sun-baked sediment. As the horizon begins to glow faintly with pre-dawn light, the landscape changes again. Gone are the rolling dunes and bone-strewn plateaus. Before you lies a flat, endless plain of hardened earth-dull gray and salt white in patches, marked by strange geometric ripples. The sun creeps higher, and you see it more clearly, not natural shapes, but remnants, lines, angles, foundations. You've stepped into the ruins of a city, or at least what once may have been one. There are no walls standing, no temples to admire. Just outlines, foundations of long-lost settlements buried under centuries of silence, their bones exposed only by the wind's occasional generosity. This is what remains of ancient trade cities, once vital oases of gold, salt, and survival. One name flickers in your mind like a mirage, Tadmeka, now known as Isuk in northern Mali. This forgotten city was once a powerhouse of Trans-Saharan trade back when camels were the 18-wheelers of the desert and caravans carried slabs of salt like sacred cargo. Tadmeka flourished. Its markets buzzed with traders from Ghana, Berbers from the north, and even whispers from across the Mediterranean. Historians still argue whether Tadmeka was older than the Ghana Empire or simply a smart parasite riding the coattails of the gold boom. Either way, it had a reputation as a city of wealth, learning, and perhaps more than a little mystery. A medieval Arab geographer once described it as a town built from gold dust, though he was probably being poetic. Probably you step carefully over what looks like a collapsed dwelling, its mud brick outlines still visible in the dust. Your foot brushes something hard. You crouch and pull out a shard of glazed pottery, deep blue and white, unmistakably imported. Imagine that, a tea bowl or oil lamp from medieval Spain or Persia, lost in the middle of the Sahara. This was no isolated village. This was a hub, a crossroads, where north met, west met, deeper Africa, and all of it came wrapped in gold and salt. You can't talk about Saharan cities without salt. Back then, salt was currency, literally, pressed food, maintained health, and was so valued that entire caravans risked death just to fetch it. One of the great centers of this salty economy was Tagaza, a bleak mining settlement further north, where workers hacked at salt slabs in shimmering heat, their hands blistered and lips cracked. Here's your quirky fact of the night. Some ancient Saharan merchants were paid in salt, and then used gold to buy things like grain. Gold was for trade, salt was for survival. Try explaining that to your modern wallet. Of course, Tagaza wasn't much to look at, even then. But the whole town was built from salt blocks, walls, roofs, even furniture. Imagine living in a house that slowly dissolves every time it rains. Then again in Tagaza, it rarely did, and it wasn't the only one. Hundreds of trade stops dotted the desert. From Walata in Mauritania to Gao and Timbuktu, in Mali some long lost, others slowly rediscovered. Beneath the creeping sand, you probably know Timbuktu as the punchline to jokes about remote places. But once, It was the beating heart of Saharan commerce and scholarship. The city of Gao predates even that founded around the 7th century. It grew into a thriving hub of trade, politics, and Islamic learning. Clay tablets and ancient letters. Unearthed here describe bustling markets, legal disputes, and gossip over imports. And yet they're fading, swallowed by the shifting dunes, eaten by salt, worn down by time. You sit beside a ridge that was likely once a road. Camels would have, plotted here in long lines, their bells tinkling, their feet crunching on sand and stone. They carried ivory, kola nuts, ostrich feathers, and cloth, and sometimes people too. Slavery, sadly, was part of the picture. A reminder that wealth and horror often walked hand in hand. Somewhere along this very road, a traveler in the 14th century might have crossed paths with one of the wealthiest men in history, Mansa Musa. Yes, that Mansa Musa, the emperor of Mali, whose 1324 pilgrimage to Mecca was so extravagant, it crashed the economies of multiple cities en route. He gave away so much gold that markets destabilized. He didn't just pass through the desert. He redefined it. Imagine being one of the local merchants when his caravan rolls in thousands of camels, each loaded with gold, attendants, scholars, horses, dancers, maybe even griots, singing the emperor's praises. You offer him a bowl of dates and a place to sit. He hands you a gold nugget the size of a potato. Wild times, but even empires fall. Trade routes shift. The gold dries up. Loses its luster. The desert forgets. Here's the fringe theory for this chapter. Some explorers infringe. Historians believe there's a still lost city beneath the sands, older than Tadmeka or Timbuktu, possibly tied to a pre-Islamic empire. They call it Zerzuru, the oasis of little birds described in medieval texts as a white city guarded by black giants. It's never been found, but the legend persists. Could it have existed, or is it just wishful thinking, an ancient mirage given form by imagination and thirst? Either way, you keep moving. You pass a cluster of weather-smoothed stones, aligned suspiciously neatly. Someone slept here once, someone cooked here, someone bartered for cloth or argued over camel prices. This was life, not just history. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes heat, like you tie a scarf across your face, letting only your eyes peer. Out like the Tuareg, the desert's legendary blue men, whose indigo-dyed veils stain their skin and mark their resilience. They've traveled these routes for centuries and still do. The Tuareg didn't build empires of stone. They built empires of movement, fluid, mobile, reliant on memory and landscape instead of buildings. Their knowledge of oases, stars, and sand made them indispensable to the trade networks that once thrived here. And they're still around, riding motorcycles now as often as camels, but their stories remain. Some passed down in songs, others in whispered warnings of storms cursed. Wells and places best left undisturbed. You pause beside a patch of cracked earth. Something glints faintly. A coin, a bead, a broken blade. You're not sure, and it doesn't matter, because every grain here is history. Every breath is borrowed from a world that used to sing. You rise and keep walking. Somewhere ahead is the next ghost, another whisper from beneath the sands. You wake up early, or maybe you never quite slept. The sand under your blanket was too uneven, or perhaps the wind whispered too many questions. Either way, you're walking again, feet crunching over red pebbles, and fine dust drawn now by stories. Not of stone, but of paper. You're heading to Chinguetti, a Saharan town that looks like time gave up trying to modernize it. Low stone houses, dry wind-blasted streets, and a single minaret that peers into the sky like it's still waiting for the 13th century to return. There are no neon signs here, just the sound of sandals on stone and the quiet hum of old secrets. You don't come to Chinguetti for comfort. Come for what's hiding inside its walls. One of the oldest and most mysterious desert libraries in the world. Yes, libraries plural. There are 5 in the old quarter, each one family-run, passed down for centuries. Inside them lie thousands of ancient manuscripts, leather-bound, dusty, fading, and totally irreplaceable. You knock on a wooden door, it creaks open, and you're led into a small, dark room. Shelves line the walls, crooked, uneven, brimming, with books that look like they might crumble if you breathe too hard. The air is dry with a tang of animal hide and sand. You're shown one text after another, a Quran from the 11th century, treatise on astronomy written when the Crusades were still raging, a book on medicine quoting Galen in one chapter, and quoting dreams in the next. You're told they were written by scholars, merchants, desert mystics. That Chingati was once a center of Islamic learning, a stop on the pilgrimage route to Mecca, a town where camels rested while their owners debated theology by firelight. Some say over 30,000 manuscripts once existed here. Fewer now. Wind, war, and water damage have had their say. You ask what's in them, these fragile pages. The caretaker opens one. The writing is tight, confident, written with an ink made of soot and gum Arabic. You spot diagrams of stars, charts of lunar cycles, margin notes in faded red ink. But not all of them are so polite. Some manuscripts are banned in certain households, texts of forbidden knowledge rumored to contain magical incantations, dream interpretation tables, or coded diagrams of unseen worlds. You're not supposed to touch those. You're not even supposed to ask. Of course you do anyway. One caretaker finally relents. He pulls out a book wrapped in cloth. You lean closer. This one talks of numerology, of letters that can unlock time, of symbols said to summon jinns, the same ones from pre-Islamic lore, creatures of smoke and whisper. There's even a diagram showing the ideal orientation for burying cursed manuscripts. You smirk. You're definitely not burying anything today. Here's the thing. Historians still argue whether these texts are the real deal or just copies of hearsay. Were they teaching tools or treasure maps? Some scholars insist these are remnants of early science, astronomy, and alchemy still tangled together. Others think they're coded political commentaries hiding behind metaphor to dodge religious authorities. Then there are the locals who believe some of the manuscripts are cursed, and that the ink itself carries bad luck, a worse knowledge no one should hold. Your guide points to a shelf with several thin volumes, their spines warped by heat. He won't touch them, just nods. They whisper, he says, then he chuckles. Or maybe he doesn't. You step outside. The sun blinds you after so much shadow. It's something shifted. You look at Chingeti differently now, not just as a relic, but as a living puzzle, quietly resisting time. The streets are mostly empty. The sand pushes against doorways like it wants in. Donkey brays somewhere nearby, indifferent to your existential moment. But you're still thinking about that book wrapped in cloth. It hits you that these texts survived not because they were hidden, but because people refused to let them go. Families passed them down, protected them, sometimes buried them during raids, sometimes rescued them from fire. It's not just preservation, it's devotion. And here's your quirky little fact. One manuscript in Chingeti supposedly contains the oldest known recipe for date syrup mixed with powdered camel hoof. Yes, really? It's said to cure anything from sore throats to broken hearts. But don't expect it at your local pharmacy anytime soon. You walk toward the mosque, said to be one of the oldest in continuous use in West Africa. It's made from mud brick and limestone, its square minaret casting a short shadow in the morning sun. No ornate carvings, just function and faith and sand, and surrounding all of it a silence that feels intelligent. You sit by a wall, drink lukewarm water from your canteen, and let your thoughts drift. Here's a strange one. What if these libraries are just the visible tips? What if somewhere deeper in the Sahara, beneath collapsed ruins or long-forgotten towns, lie entire caches of unread manuscripts, sealed in stone or sand, full of wisdom the world lost track of? There's precedent for it. Mali, the fabled city of Timbuktu, also harbors thousands of ancient manuscripts, many smuggled out during modern conflicts. Some written in Spanish, Hebrew, or obscure dialects no longer spoken. The Sahara may be dry, but its libraries are anything but, and the debate, oh, it's alive. Some scholars claim Chingeti's texts include evidence of early African astronomy that predates European records. Others argue these books reveal long-lost trade routes, linking sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean centuries before Roman maps marked the land. Still others dismiss these claims, chalking them up to wishful thinking or colonial over-romanticizing. But here's the thing, none of them have read every book. No one has. That's the twist. These libraries are overflowing with unread material, thousands of pages, some cataloged, many not, in languages barely spoken, but on subjects ranging from goat breeding techniques to theories of planetary motion. And unlike digital files, these can burn, or rot, or vanish under the shifting dunes, which means time is ticking. You glance back at the house you just left, its doorway already half-shadowed. Somewhere in that room, on some low shelf, might be a book no one's opened in 300 years. Or ever. Here you are alive in the moment, surrounded by what might be the last gasp of a paper civilization before it turns to dust. You walk on toward the edge of town. The wind has picked up again. The desert is always moving, always burying, always revealing. As you cross the last cobblestone threshold of Chinguetti, look back once and then never again. Because what's hiding under the Sahara sands isn't always a city or a skeleton or a ruin. Sometimes it's a sentence, asterisk. You trudge on, and now the sand beneath your feet starts to crunch a little differently. It's glassy. Tiny flecks of green and yellow sparkle under the sunlight ground up. Gemstones scattered across the desert. That's not your imagination. You're walking across the great sand sea of Egypt. And what crunches underfoot isn't ordinary sand, it's Libyan. Desert glass, beautiful, strange, ancient, and here's the kicker, no one really agrees on how it got here. Pick up a shard. It feels smoother than quartz, warmer than beach glass, and shimmers like frozen lightning. Some pieces are small as buttons, or others as big as dinner plates. Locals have known about this glass for centuries, but it didn't attract international curiosity until the 1930s. That's when geologists, cartographers, and treasure hunters all started sniffing around, thinking, what in the blistered Sahara could have forged something like this? Spoiler, it wasn't a campfire. To melt sand into glass, you need heat. A lot of it, at least 600 degrees Celsius, way hotter than lava, way hotter than a lightning strike. And the Sahara, despite its daily tantrums, doesn't produce that on its own. So how did it happen? The prevailing theory is an ancient meteor impact, one so hot, so violent, that it blasted a shockwave into the surface, flash-frying the desert. Florin transforming ordinary sand into glossy lumps of natural glass. A celestial kill, if you like. Only one problem. There's no crater, no big hole, no scorched rim. No neat bowl in the earth pointing to a rock from space. Just thousands of square kilometers of glass chunks spilled like God's marbles without a clear origin point. So the debates began. Some say the impact came from a meteor that exploded midair. Thermal airbursts like the Tunguska event in Siberia. No, that would explain the heat, the pressure, the absence of a physical crater. Others point to evidence that suggests something even stranger. That maybe this was no ordinary meteor. Maybe it had cometary material, ice, and dust, which could vaporize on entry and cause an explosion that didn't leave behind the typical rocky residue. And then there's the fringe crowd, the ones who raise their eyebrows and whisper, alien tech. Yeah, we went there. A few pseudo-archaeologists and more than one late-night podcast have claimed that Libyan desert glass could be the melted remains of an ancient energy weapon. Think death. Rays orbital lasers, ancient astronauts zapping the desert into green glass submission. You roll your eyes now, but admit it when you look at that gleaming fragment in your hand, cool and silent, shaped by forces no one can quite agree, and it does feel otherworldly. Here's your historical curveball. Libyan desert glass was actually used by the ancient Egyptians. Carob, carved from it, was found in Tutankhamun's tomb, set into a pectoral necklace alongside gold and lapis lazuli. Dada, that's how prized it was, fit for a god-king's chest. Tut's necklace was buried for 3,300 years ago, and yet that glass is likely millions of years old. Let that time warp sink in for a moment. Some historians argue the Egyptians knew exactly where the glass came from, that desert nomads brought it in tribute, or that specialized expeditions were sent to gather it. Others think it was simply washed down through trade, traded like a holy gemstone divorced from its blazing birth. Nobody knows for sure, because the desert's not telling. Now for your quirky tidbit. During World War II, an English pilot flying over The area claimed the glass flashed up at him like mirrors and thought he'd spotted an enemy base. His crew made an emergency landing only to discover they'd been lured in by shattered sunlight on ancient glass. The Sahara tricked them. Again, as you walk farther across the shimmering field, you realize this glass is only the symptom. The disease, the source, the wound is still missing. Maybe buried deeper under layers of sand and time. Maybe it was vaporized so completely that it left behind no scar. Just the memory. The desert doesn't offer clarity. It offers layers. And now you're stepping into another one, because just beyond this field, rising like the teeth of a half-buried beast, are formations known as the Black Desert. Jagged ridges of basalt, volcanic outcrops. Nothing shiny here, just stone and shadow. You stop at a rock with odd striations lines in the basalt that seem to neat. Too symmetrical, your guide shrugs. People say they're natural, he mutters. But who really knows? That seems to be the refrain out here. Who really knows? You rest beneath a black-streaked hill and open your notebook if you're the kind of traveler who still carries one, and you jot down a theory. The Sahara isn't empty, it's just patient. Wind blows glass shards across your path like dry leaves. They rattle gently, a desert lullaby. You take another piece, slip it into your pocket, and promise not to tell customs before you leave the area. One last fact glints in your mind. Libyan desert glass is purer than most man-made glass. Over 98% silica, no bubbles, no imperfections. It would take cutting-edge furnaces today to replicate that level of quality, so who or what made it first? You walk on, the sun is low now, and everything turns gold. Now the glass field fades behind you, blending back into ordinary sand. Keep looking over your shoulder, half expecting a crater to suddenly appear. Or maybe a ship, but there's nothing, just wind. You barely notice the moment it happens, but the landscape shifts again. The sands give way to stone. Broad plateaus rise gently on the horizon, their surfaces scored with age, like dry skin stretched taut over the bones of something massive. The dunes, those soft and shifting companions of the last few hundred kilometers, fall away, replaced by something harder, more ancient, less forgiving, and there, almost apologetically, looms the Great Pyramid of Giza. You blink, rub your eyes. Not because it's hard to see, it's the feeling that gets you. Like you've stumbled into the presence of something that has been waiting, watching. You've seen it in pictures, in films, on postcards mailed from people you've lost touch with. But here it is, the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the only one still standing. But this isn't about the pyramid itself, not entirely. You're here for what lies beneath. You take a breath, squint against the wind, and approach the base. Unlike the neatly trimmed image burned into travel brochures, the reality is rugged. Massive blocks, each weighing as much as a car, stacked with the precision of obsessive gods. You circle it, tracing its jagged shadow until you find a spot where the stone seems odd, a joint not quite right, a crack perhaps, or a seam. You're not the first to notice this, because below the pyramids, deep under the Giza plateau, lies a maze of tunnels, shafts, and chambers, many of which aren't on the public map. Here's the mainstream historical fact. Even during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu 4,500 years ago, excavation into the bedrock of Giza had already begun. The subterranean chamber beneath the Great Pyramid was carved directly into natural limestone. It's a rough, eerie space. It doesn't fit the rest of the pyramid's design. It's almost like it was an afterthought, or worse, a relic. Now here's where things start to slant sideways. For decades, centuries, people have whispered about a lost labyrinth underneath Giza. Ancient sources, like the Greek historian Herodotus, described a vast underground complex, filled with thousands of rooms, courtyards, hieroglyphic walls. He claimed it made the pyramids themselves seem dull by comparison, and yet no one's ever conclusively found it. Historians still argue whether Herodotus was misled by local guides, repeating exaggerations or flat-out lies. Others suggest he saw something that's since been reburied, either by nature or intent, which brings you to one of the strangest episodes in archaeological footnotes, the work of Dr. Zahi Hawass, the polarizing, camera-friendly Egyptologist with a flair for drama. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Hawass oversaw a series of excavations around and beneath the Giza Plateau. Some televised, some not. One team discovered a sealed shaft near the Sphinx, descending into the earth. House dismissed it as unremarkable. Another team, funded in part by an offshoot of a certain German archaeological society, claimed to have ground-penetrating radar scans that suggested hollow spaces, possibly chambers beneath the Great Pyramid. Itself, no formal digs followed. Then, in a detail that smells suspiciously like something out of a thriller novel, a major discovery in 2008 was abruptly hushed up. Independent Egyptian researchers reportedly located a vast complex beneath Hawara, south of Giza, matching Herodotus's description. They released digital maps and data online shortly after the site was closed. No public follow-up, no press releases, nothing. And to this day, that area remains sealed, guarded. Now, you shuffle deeper into the rock-cut corridors allowed. To tourist school, narrow and steep, the silence down here is so thick it almost vibrates. Your flashlight flickers over the walls. Dust dances in the beam. There are ventilation shafts leading nowhere, passages too tight for a person to squeeze through, blind shafts, hidden alcoves, and one tunnel a little off to the side that leads to a stone door with no handle. You press your ear to it. Nothing but someone or something designed this place with more than just grandeur in mind. It feels functional, concealed, like a blueprint half-erased. Theories flourish like mushrooms. Some suggest the ancient Egyptians were guarding knowledge, not just bodies. That the lower chambers of the Giza Plateau contain lost records, blueprints for cosmic alignment, even star charts from before the pharaohs. Others go further, that the pyramid was never a tomb at all, but a resonance device, harnessing underground water channels and acoustic harmonics to generate energy. Sounds wild, yes, but some physicists have noted peculiar electromagnetic activity in the king's chamber. Enough to tickle your compass into confusion. And there's that fringe theory, again our old friend whispering from beneath its tinfoil. Hood, it says, the pyramids weren't built by Egyptians at all. They were inherited, constructed by an older civilization, possibly Atlantean, possibly extraterrestrial, that encoded messages in stone, visible only to those who knew the right vibrations, the correct frequencies, the perfect ratio. You don't have to believe it. But down here, in the shadows under one of humanity's greatest mysteries, belief starts to feel like a flexible thing. You place your hand on the wall. It's cold and somehow humming, just faintly. It's like a held breath. Now, here's your quirky tidbit. In 2017, using muon tomography, a scanning technique that measures cosmic particles, scientists discovered a previously unknown void inside the Great Pyramid. A chamber the size of a jet plane, in 30 meters above the Grand Gallery. No one knows what's inside. They can't get to it. Not yet. No digging, no drilling. The Egyptian government forbids it. It's for now. And that's the kind of detail that would keep any conspiracy theorist up at night. So here you are, standing beneath a megastructure older than your civilization, inside a puzzle too vast to solve, when unanswered questions floating all around you like dust in the beam of your light. Above, the desert sun beats down on tourists taking selfies below. In the deep veins of Giza are locked rooms, unread scrolls, the faint echo of footsteps that may have passed through 5,000 years before you. As you ascend back toward the light, your heart catches one last time. What if the pyramid isn't hiding anything? What if it is the thing being hidden? And what's really buried underneath? Is you. You leave the Great Pyramid's shadow behind, walking eastward where the desert's rhythm changes again. The horizon blurs into a vast expanse dotted by strange, slender hills that rise like teeth, blackened, volcanic in origin, not sand. You're in the region known as the Black Desert, a stark contrast to the golden dunes you've passed. The Black Desert is an eerie place. Jagged basalt formations tower across the landscape, relics of ancient volcanic activity that shaped this land millions of years ago. The stones here absorb heat by day and release it at night, making the air shimmer in waves. The silence here isn't the peaceful kind. It's heavy, charged as if the rocks themselves are holding secrets. Among these rocky spires, scattered glass fragments glisten under the sun. This isn't ordinary sand or desert debris. It's Libyan desert glass. Again, the mystical natural glass formed from unknown cosmic forces. remnants of the ancient meteorite impact you learned about earlier. These fragments shimmer like shards of emerald and gold scattered across the dark terrain. Their origins still a matter of scientific debate. You reach a cluster of volcanic cones and pause, feeling the weight of millennia pressing down on you. The desert winds swirl around the black rocks, carrying with them faint whispers of ancient times, of forgotten peoples who once traversed this harsh land. In the shadow of a towering basalt hill, notice faint engravings on the stone surface. Weathered beyond recognition but still visible enchant petroglyphs etched into the volcanic rock, depicting camels, hunting scenes, and enigmatic symbols. These are the marks left by early desert nomads, stories carved into stone to survive. Time's relentless erasure. You run your fingers over the grooves, wondering about the lives of those who made them. Were they traders, warriors, or shamans? What did they hope to convey to the future? The Black Desert's geology is a stark reminder of the Sahara's complex past, not just a sea of sand, but a mosaic of environments shaped by fire, water, and time. It challenges the common image of the desert as barren and lifeless. Nearby, a cluster of small, hardy plants cling stubbornly to life, their green leaves a vivid splash against the dark stone. This is the desert's resilience on full display. Here's an intriguing historical fact. In Roman times, the Black Desert was known for its rich deposits of vitriol and natron, substances used in glassmaking and mummification. Roman traders valued these minerals highly, and small caravans traversed this dangerous terrain to harvest and transport them. Historians still argue whether these mineral routes influenced the rise of Saharan trade networks or were isolated enterprises. What's clear is that this harsh land was far from useless, held resources coveted. Across empires among fringe theories is a persistent legend that the Black Desert hides the remains of a lost city, swallowed by volcanic activity and sands. Some say explorers have found foundations beneath the basalt. Evidence is scarce and often dismissed as natural formations. You continue walking, your footsteps echoing faintly against the stones. The desert's silence feels almost sacred. Here, as dusk approaches, you find a flat rock to rest on. The sky above darkens to a deep indigo, and stars emerge, sparkling in the desert's clear air. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of light. You look back at the shimmering glass fragments, the towering volcanic cones, the ancient petroglyphs, and realize you're standing on layers of history and mystery intertwined. The Sahara is not just a desert. It's a palimpsesta place where nature and humanity have written, erased and rewritten stories over millennia. You tuck a small piece of desert glass into your pocket, tangible connection to this vast, enigmatic landscape as night deepens. The desert hums softly, the whisper of wind, the distant call of a night bird, the eternal heartbeat of sand and stone. You close your eyes, feeling the desert's breath. Wonder what other secrets lie waiting beneath the endless Sahara sands. You rise before dawn, the desert chill biting through your clothes as you step toward a faint outline on the horizon. The light here is soft and blue, the air dry but alive with anticipation. Ahead lies the vast expanse of the Tassili Najr, a sprawling plateau carved by wind and water over millions of years, a place where stone meets sky and jagged, surreal formations. This is no ordinary landscape. Tassili Najr is known as the Plateau of the Rivers. The rivers have long since vanished. Its rock walls are adorned with thousands of prehistoric petroglyphs and cave paintings, some dating back over 12,000 years, depicting animals, humans, and scenes of daily life that hint at a time when this desert was lush and green. You trace the faded figures of giraffes, elephants, and cattle etched into the sandstone images of a world that feels like a dream. The people who made these paintings lived in a Sahara unrecognizable from today, a time when savanna stretched as far as the eye could see. When water was abundant and the desert was a cradle of life, you wandered deeper into the caves, the walls, echoing with silent stories. Colors, reds, blacks, whites still hold vibrancy despite the centuries. Imagine the artists mixing pigments from ochre, charcoal, and clay, painting their hopes, fears, and rituals under flickering firelight. This art is one of the oldest visual records of human civilization in the Sahara. a window into the lives of people who shaped the land long before empires rose and fell. Here's a historical fact. The Tassili rock art was first documented by European explorers in the 1930s, sparking debates about the Sahara's prehistoric climate and the migration of early humans across Africa. But it's not just ancient history. Some of the images depict strange, almost alien figures, humanoids with elongated limbs, mysterious masks, and what appear to be early forms of ritual dress. These have fueled fringe theories about ancient astronauts or lost advanced civilizations. Scholars still argue whether these unusual depictions represent mythological beings, shamanic visions, or symbolic storytelling. The debate adds layers to an already rich tapestry. As you stand in the cool shadows of a cavern, you feel a connection to these ancient artists. Their world was one of survival and adaptation, where art was both expression and perhaps a way to commune with forces beyond. The desert outside is waking up, the rising sun casting long shadows across the rocky landscape. You step out, taking a deep breath of dry, fragrant air nearby. You notice scattered tools, flint blades, pottery shards, remnants of daily life from the Neolithic period, hinting at communities that thrived here thousands of years ago. Pause by a small stream bed, now dry, imagining it flowing once again, bringing life to this arid place. The Sahara's story isn't just about sand and heat. It's about changed climatic shifts that transformed a green paradise into the vast desert you see today. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some of the cave paintings show cattle with humps believed to be the ancestors of today's humpback zebu. Linking prehistoric art to modern animal breeds still found across Africa, you reflect on the resilience of life, art and memory carved into stone and spirit alike. As the sun climbs higher, you prepare to leave the Tassili Niger carrying with you the whispers of a forgotten age. The desert, ever-shifting, awaits your next step. The sun is blazing now and your throat feels dry, but there's no stopping. Ahead, the landscape flattens, then dips into what looks like a shimmering mirage. Oh, but this is real, a vast salt flat, gleaming white and endless under the harsh light. You've arrived at the Chat El Jared, the largest salt pan in the Sahara. From above, it looks like a gigantic cracked mirror stretching over 7,000 square kilometers. But close up, it's a surreal landscape of salt crystals, dried mud, and shallow pools that reflect the sky like liquid glass. It's an inhospitable place. No plants, no animals, and just salt and silence, broken only by the occasional crackling sound of shifting crust. Yet this eerie expanse hides stories as rich as any ancient city thousands of years ago. During the African humid period, this area was a lush lake teeming with lifa, crucial water source for humans and animals alike. Over millennia, the climate shifted, drying up the lake and leaving behind the salt pan you see today. Here's your mainstream fact. The Chat El Jared has been a critical stop on caravan routes for centuries, guiding traders through the desert. Its reflective surface can be disorienting, creating illusions of water that can lure travelers into danger. Local folklore adds a mystical layer. The salt flats are said to be haunted by spirits, guardians of lost treasures and ancient secrets buried beneath the salt crust. And you can't help but feel the weight of those tales as you walk carefully across the fragile surface. During the 1930s, the salt flats attracted geologists searching for potassium salts, a valuable mineral used in fertilizers and industry. Extraction operations began, altering the landscape subtly but irreversibly. Historians still argue whether these industrial endeavors helped or harmed the fragile desert ecosystem, but there's no denying their economic importance. A quirky tidbit. The Chat El Jared was the filming location for scenes of the desert planet Tatooine in the original Star Wars trilogy. So, when you stand here, you're literally walking across a piece of cinematic history as you navigate the salt pan. Your feet crunching softly, you notice faint traces of ancient footprints, perhaps fossilized remains of animals, or even early humans who once roamed this watery world. It's a humbling reminder that what seems desolate today was once vibrant, and it brings you to a scholarly debate that's still very much alive. Some researchers believe that the Sahara's desertification accelerated human migrations out of Africa, shaping civilizations across continents. Others propose that the desert's harshness fostered technological and cultural innovations. driving human adaptability, the salt flats are silent witnesses to all of it. As you reach the edge of the Chad el Jared, you look back once more. The blinding white stretches to the horizon, meeting a sky so vast it seems endless. You realize that beneath these salt crystals lie not just natural processes but echoes of human history, travelers, traders, dreamers, and survivors who dared. To cross this unforgiving expanse, the Sahara doesn't just bury history. Sometimes it reflects it. You pocket a small salt crystal, its facets sparkling like a tiny frozen star. The desert whispers, and you listen. You step away from the blinding salt flats and into a landscape that seems almost otherworldly. The horizon is marked by sprawling dunes that roll like waves frozen in time. But hidden among these sands are the remains of a city, not just any city, but the fabled Timbuktu, a place whose very name conjures images of mystery, wealth, and scholarly brilliance. Timbuktu was once a beacon of knowledge in the Sahara. It's the heart of the Mali Empire and a hub for traders traveling across Africa and beyond. In its golden age, it was home to some of the world's earliest universities and a vast collection of manuscripts covering subjects from astronomy to poetry. You imagine scholars poring over texts by candlelight, debates swirling in the courtyards, and camel caravans laden with gold and salt arriving from distant lands. Here's a historical fact. By the 15th century, Timbuktu had amassed a library with over 700,000 manuscripts, many handwritten in Arabic, covering not only Islamic theology but also law, science, and literature. But the city's treasures haven't always been safe. Over the centuries, Timbuktu endured invasions, political upheaval, and neglect. In recent years, during conflict in Mali, many manuscripts were hidden away by locals to protect them from destruction. Historians still argue over how many manuscripts survived and the full extent of Timbuktu's influence on African and global knowledge. Now, a quirky tidbit. During the 16th century, the city was visited by Leo Africanus, a North African scholar who described Timbuktu as a city of gold, which only fueled European imaginations and legends of vast wealth hidden in the Sahara. Walking through the dusty streets, you can almost hear the echoes of scholars and traders, the hustle of the market, and the rustle of pages turning in ancient books today. Timbuktu is quieter, its glory days faded but not forgotten. Its manuscripts have become symbols of cultural resilience and the enduring power of knowledge. You pause beside a weathered manuscript, marveling at how the desert, which so often seems like a place of silence and forgetting, has also been a guardian of wisdom. The Sahara sands may bury cities, but they also preserve stories, sometimes in the delicate curls of parchment, sometimes in the memory of those who carry them as the sun sets, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. You reflect on the vastness of the Sahara, a landscape both harsh and generous, silent yet full of voices, and as you prepare to move on, you realize that the secrets hidden under these sands are not just of stone and glass, but of ideas and dreams waiting patiently to be uncovered. Desert air cools as twilight descends, painting the dunes in deep indigos and soft violets. Your journey takes you to the edge of the Saharan Atlas Mountains, where the rugged landscape tells a different story. Here the Sahara's boundary is not a gradual fading but a sharp, jagged rise, a meeting place of rock and sand. The Atlas Mountains have stood sentinel for millennia, their peaks carved by time and weather, their valleys cradling unique ecosystems. For centuries, Berber tribes have called this rugged land home, preserving traditions and ways of life that stretch back into prehistory. You tread along ancient trails, imagining the countless travelers, nomads, traders, warriors who have traversed these passes, carrying goods and stories between the Mediterranean and the heart of Africa. Here's a mainstream fact. The Atlas region is known for its rich deposits of ancient rock art. Some depicting hunting scenes, animals, and symbolic motifs, evidence of early human occupation dating back thousands of years. Historians still argue about the full extent of the Atlas' role in Saharan trade and cultural exchange. Some see it as a barrier, others as a bridge linking diverse peoples. Among the quirkiest tidbits is the legend of the Saharan Blue Men, the Tuareg tribes, known for their indigo-dyed clothing, which stains their skin blue, called the Blue People there. Famed for their nomadic lifestyle, fierce independence, and rich oral traditions. You sit on a rock overlooking a valley, the stars beginning to prick the night sky. You listen to the wind whisper through the mountain passes, carrying tales of ancient caravans and lost kingdoms in this borderland between desert and mountain. You feel the Sahara's complexity, a landscape, not just of sand, but of stone and story. As night deepens, realize that beneath the Sahara sands are layers not only of earth, but of human experience, of resilience, mystery, and enduring wonder. The desert wind has softened now, the blazing sun long set, replaced by a canopy of glittering stars stretching infinitely overhead. You find yourself near the edges of the Libyan desert, one of the most remote and least explored parts of the Sahara. This is where silence takes on a new meaning, the kind of silence that presses against your ears, fills your lungs, and slows your heartbeat. Here, beneath layers of sand and stone, lie secrets that challenge everything we think we know about human history. Recent discoveries have uncovered ancient burial mounds, mysterious stone circles, and even enigmatic inscriptions carved into rocky outcrops. Some suggest these marks belong to early humans, others to travelers from distant lands. One particularly puzzling find is the Uinat Plateau, where archaeologists have documented thousands of rock art sites depicting animals, people, and abstract symbols, some dating back over 12,000 years. But what's truly fascinating is the ongoing debate. Historians still argue whether these sites indicate a lost civilization or a network of scattered nomadic cultures connected by trade and shared rituals. A quirky tidbit to ponder: some rock carvings depict what look like giraffes with what could be interpreted as helmets or armor, sparking fringe theories about prehistoric encounters with unknown creatures or even early depictions of alien visitors. You wander slowly, letting the desert's vastness wash over you. The cold night air wraps around your skin. The stars feel close enough to touch. You think back to the libraries of Chingati, the shimmering desert glass, the hidden chambers beneath the pyramids, and the rich tapestry of life etched into stone and sand. The Sahara isn't just a barren wasteland. It's a palimpsest of time, a place where nature and human history intertwine in a slow dance of creation and destruction. As you settle in for the night, listen to the soft rustle of sand, the distant howl of a desert fox, and the whisper of secrets that have waited millennia to be heard. And in this moment, you feel the Sahara's deepest truth. Beneath these sands lie stories not yet fully told, mysteries not yet fully solved, and a history as vast and endless as the desert itself. You let the vast silence settle around you as the desert night deepens, a blanket of stars above and cool sand beneath. This is the wind down, softening your senses, slowing your thoughts. Imagine the Sahara now, not as a harsh expanse, but as a gentle sea of shifting light and shadow. The memories of ancient cities, glass forged by cosmic fire, and hidden chambers blend into a quiet hum. Like a whispered lullaby, feel the warmth of the day ebb away, replaced by a soothing coolness that wraps around you like a well-worn shawl. The stories you've walked through unfold gently, like a slow-moving river, each current carrying a fragment of time history's echo in the sand. The desert's vastness becomes a place of peace, slow breath, an invitation to rest. Imagine the soft crunch of sand beneath your feet, the faint rustle of wind through sparse grasses, the distant call of night creatures settling into their own rhythms. Your mind drifts to the scribes of Chingyeti, carefully preserving fragile manuscripts in cool shadowed rooms, a shimmering Libyan desert glass forged in a cataclysmic cosmic fire, now cool and smooth in your hand. The hidden voids beneath the Great Pyramid, silent but alive with possibility. These images soften, fading into a gentle haze. The desert itself seems to breathe with you, a slow pulse beneath the stars. You feel your eyelids growing heavy. Now the night sky stretches endlessly above, stars twinkling like quiet promises. The Sahara whispers its ancient secrets not to frighten, but to comfort. You're cradled by time and space, a traveler on a long journey. Send, invited to rest. So, as you settle down, feel the calm seep in the slow, deep calm of the desert night. Sweet dreams.